Hey, Bug, I just wanted to do a quick recap of the major issues happening in our regions. For the people that don't know us, we cover Europe, Middle East, and Africa as one region. Then we split Asia Pacific into the four sub-regions: North Asia, Southeast Asia, Australasia in the Pacific, and South Asia. Bug, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to review today's production yet, but certainly I know there was a protest in Nepal. Are you on top of that, or?
Yes, Paul. The protest in Nepal follows the controversy which is associated with the MCC, the Millennium Challenge Agreement with the US. The current political landscape in Nepal being dominated by the communists, there is a clear political tension between the right-wingers or the centrists and the left-wingers who have come up since the civil war in 2006. The protests which were expected today is primarily about that. The current prime minister is from Nepali Congress, who is considered to be a centrist, and the opposition, which was dethroned earlier this year, are leading this entire drama around MCC, which is as old as 2017. So businesses need to watch out basically for major disruptions in capital city, that is Kathmandu, and other major towns. But I do not expect this to go out of hand. The security forces in Nepal are fairly capable of handling such minor skirmishes or clashes.
And what about, if you don't mind me switching from South Asia to EMEA, how about in Afghanistan? Obviously, they've announced an interim government, but are they going to be able to govern as well as they fought the war? Are they going to be able to maintain unity if they look to sort of show a liberal face to the West? Is that going to undermine them in Afghanistan in terms of maintaining power? How's the government perceived there?
Yes, Paul. I mean, that has been a major question for almost every other stakeholder in the country, whether it's international organization or foreign governments, whether they're allied with the Taliban or not. Taliban have been a prolific insurgent force, if I may actually call that. They have withstood the wrath of the world's largest or the most strongest army, and they have come back into power this year after signing a deal with the US in Doha. Now, the recent announcement of an interim government headed by Mullah Akhund is a surprise, because the Mullah Akhund as a personality is fairly unknown. He was a foreign minister in the previous regime that was back in 1990s, but he's being portrayed as the front man has been a surprise. And this has come after inter-service intelligence, that is Pakistan's intelligence agency's chief, landed in Kabul literally 48 hours before the actual announcement. There was supposed to be some clashes between multiple factions within Taliban. So there seems to be a deal brokered by Pakistan to ensure there is some sort of a government before they can actually finalize a stable government for maybe later this year. About the governance is concerned, it's a big surprise to me. It would be a big surprise to me if they actually can focus on services, delivery of critical services such as healthcare and education, or even infrastructure for that matter, because Taliban's track record is very shady, because they have been focused on how to enforce their version of Islamic laws rather than actually governing the country to ensure population do develop.
Yeah, got you. And look, I mean, Southeast Asia is a relatively quiet day, although with its usual issues. We've got typhoons across the top of Southeast Asia into North Asia. We got demonstrations ongoing in Papua, in Sentani, and some fairly large issues that are going on behind the scenes in Indonesia. I don't think today warrants covering off on all of that. But we've also got situations where COVID's running rampant throughout the region. We've got political instability in Thailand, of course. The Thai military government's having troubles containing COVID. There's split signals in that they're going to open up tourism and open up travel, yet they haven't got the vaccinations in place to do that. Very interestingly, in my home city of Hua Hin, they've been announcing for months that in October they're going to open up, and the actual Chamber of Commerce and the Hotel Association, which on the surface you would think have a lot to benefit, are going, Phuket that has been opened up's got between 5 and 10% vacancy rates. We've got a whole heap of new procedures we're going to have to implement and pay for. We're at a financial rock bottom. So the Chamber of Commerce and the hotels themselves are going, hey, look, we don't want to open up. There's not enough vaccines in here. There's not enough domestic safeguards in place. So ironically, that's going to be delayed. Obviously, Australia's in its almost manic, psychopathic way of just totally locking down Melbourne, the greatest, well, most lockdown city on earth, yet it has a tiny number of deaths per million compared to other places in the world like England that are opening up. So they are, of course, announcing, but I'm not sure if they've announced it formally, but certainly information coming out of the major airlines websites is that they're going to have a bubble with Singapore, so between Singapore and Australia, though with the current mindsets and the disparity or the disconnect between the Prime Minister and the premiers, and each one running his own fiefdom and being a legend of a lectern, we'll have to see how that pans out. So back to you. Any other major issues in your regions of South Asia and EMEA?
Paul, I actually wanted to ask you about the Thai protest. Do you think it is getting out of hand?
Yes.
Do you think government can actually manage this time around?
Look, as we've been writing in our assessments and analysis, both our general one for subscribers, but specifically for clients, I think it's getting close. The indications are that it's starting to get to a point beyond the level of comfort. Obviously, the government's struggling with COVID. It's struggling with the impacts of the economic downturn because of COVID. It's struggling with various factions trying to play it. And whilst the former general, now the Prime Minister, is quite a strategic genius in how he developed a constitution, raised political parties to diffuse the power of Thaksin, what is surprising at this stage is he hasn't been able to use COVID or use his normal ways of targeting the leadership of various protester groups. The fact that they're now in multiple sites in Bangkok, and they're some very high profile areas, the Asok intersection, Ratchaprasong. These are the areas that are really main CBDs. It's where Sukhumvit and Selam lines intersect. Asok's where the MRT also lines, of course. Sukhumvit and Selam are sky trains. So it then opens up the usual issues where provocateurs, regardless of what colour shirt or who they're representing, can lob M79 grenades onto the sky trains. So it would certainly appear that this escalation, the number and the regularity of the demonstrations would be of a real concern now to the military government, because that's the one thing that if they lose control of, they can't, utilise a constitution, or they can't utilise parties that they're aligned with to survive, like they did the recent no confidence vote. So yeah, in short, the frequency, the amount of escalating violence in them, the sheer number of the demonstrations and the locations is an indicator that the situation of the stability and the ability to control it is diminished.
Thank you, Paul. In South Asia, there isn't much happening other than the Nepali protests and the drama between Pakistan and Afghanistan about their forming of government. A lot of allegations are flying around across the world that Pakistan is basically remote managing the Haqqani network, which is a major faction within Taliban, and the religious wing that is Rehbari Shura, based in Quetta, which is actually in Pakistan. So except for this drama between across the border in Pakistan, there isn't much happening in South Asia.
Yeah, look, there's one other thing I should have mentioned, I guess, in Southeast Asia, and that's in Indonesian Papua, not to be confused with Papua New Guinea, but the two most eastern provinces of Indonesia, and this is mainly for our listeners, not so much for you, Bhargav, but the two most eastern provinces are West Papua, and then Papua borders on the east with Papua New Guinea, which is the north-south line down the middle of Papua New Guinea. Sorry, in the middle of the island of New Guinea. But in Papua, we've had the TPNBP, which is what often people refer to as the OPM. They've basically stated they weren't responsible for some attacks on businesses recently. We've also had I think it was the governor of Sarong State that he's revoking palm oil licenses that he inherited from the previous governor. So those issues seem to be linked, that landowners are getting increasingly frustrated that financial decisions on their use of land and who controls that use of land, and we experience this ourselves with the big palm oil owners. All these deals are cut in Jakarta and the landowners miss out. So that's becoming a real source of friction, and you're getting a lot of governments, I beg your pardon, a lot of government officials in Jakarta cutting deals lately on sustainable energy, on gold exploration in Papua. And companies are flying in their typical solution for writing their security plans, a policeman from London or a low-level special forces guy from Perth, and they're going to suddenly have understood all these grey issues that are very complex, require a great understanding of the strengths and weaknesses of the Indonesian systems, and there are both. But there are a whole heap of hidden dangers in operating in Papua, Indonesia. People love to fly in a templated solution with an American or a British mindset. And we saw recently how well that worked over their 20 years of futile efforts in Afghanistan, with the wrong motivation, the wrong people, the wrong mindset, prejudices and discrimination. So there's a lot happening in Papua, whereas some of the companies are really well geared up. BP in particular has put a lot of thought into how they go about it, and other companies are going to struggle because they're bringing the wrong sports team to a very lethal game of rugby, and they're sending out their best badminton players to take it on. So I think that's something that people have to be really cognizant on if you've got investments in Papua, between the TPNPB, which is a masked freedom movement, which is probably better off described as a bunch of psychopathic nutters, between the greed and the corruption, between the abilities of extortion, between the landowners and the disconnects in levels of government and in cultural and indigenous rights. You really need to have a high level of expertise to be dealing with there. It's not where you don't send off the constable or the corporal to that one.
Thank you, Paul. I guess we can wrap it up here.
I think so. Look forward to chatting tomorrow. Cheers.
Thanks, Paul. See ya.